Okay, great. So, hey everyone, welcome to session 6 of our Mentor Leadership program. We're really excited to have our guest speaker today, Linda Foggie, who you've all just been chatting with. So Linda is the Executive Vice President and Head of the Yeast USA at Turner & Townsend. Turner & Townsend is also a mentor firm with us. They've been mentoring for about 2 years now, so we're really excited to hear more from Linda, and she's going to be sharing a little bit of insight on the importance of developing a personal brand and how to do it. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll all hear from Linda. And there'll be time for a Q&A towards the end. And Linda, if at any point you have any questions for the group, just feel free to ask, and we'll just have a natural conversation that way.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to chatting. So I just to lay out the format, I'm going to talk a little bit about personal branding, obviously, and why it's important. And so maybe I'll sort of I'm going to try to leave you with some actionable things that you could take away from this that you can do and implement in real life that are pretty straightforward and simple. So I'll kind of take you through that, and then after about 15 or 20 minutes or so, open it up for discussion. And also, I have a few questions I'd love to hear your thoughts on. I did have a chance to watch one of the recordings from a prior session. I saw that this was a fantastically engaged group of very smart people. So I definitely look forward to a two-way conversation and hearing from you and learning from you as well. So personal branding, I think there's really, I try to break this up into three areas today. What is it? Why do you need it? And how do you do it? If I can. And so I think when it comes to personal branding, I would say the first thing I would say is don't let it overwhelm you and don't become obsessed with trying to develop this brand overnight. I think that I can say I patience is not a virtue of mine. It's one area where I struggle. But in this case, developing a brand takes time. And so I think I'm going to say at the start of this that patience will be key. There's this saying that I don't really love that much, but people say to me sometimes, like, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. And so I think, though, it applies to personal branding, like you just take it a bit at a time. And so, a little story before I get into it. I just why I enjoy this topic. I was glad I was asked to speak on this topic. I don't get to talk about it very much, but it's something that for me, I've developed a brand um, over time. But for me to come to a city like New York, I'm not from New York. I don't have, my father wasn't a broker. I don't have deep roots in New York. So for a person like me from the south part of Virginia, I'm from Virginia Beach, to come to a city like New York, which is sometimes called one of the toughest places in the world to get things done, to work in, and not knowing anyone and entering an industry that's, at the time I started my career as an architect, very male dominated industry. So just for a person like me to think about establishing a strong brand could be very daunting. And so that's kind of why I started with, you know what, don't even let it overwhelm you. It just kind of happens over time. You do have to manage it. And I'm going to say relentlessly manage it, your brand, when you get to a certain place. But we'll kind of, hopefully I'll be able to kind of walk you through what are some of the things that you just need to be mindful of. I think personal brand is so important also because it does help to set you apart from others in the industry and the markets. And so we'll kind of talk through that. So I'll start with what is the importance? Why do you need this? Why do you need a personal brand? And a statistic from Forbes magazine says that 70% of all employers reported that they do research candidates online, and what they find influences whether the candidate moves forward in the next round. So you have a brand, it's important to manage it. But with that said, your personal brand is not just online. And so the way I look at why is this important, I say early in your career, when you enter into a room, if you walk into a meeting room, as people gather in the room, even if it's virtual on Zoom, everybody's trying to figure out what you're all about. Like, how do you think about things? How can they expect to interact with you? And so when you're early in your career, when you walk in, you're ahead of your reputation. But as you get and you're kind of slowly leaving these breadcrumbs behind, the more people that you interface and you act with, that you interact with, you're kind of slowly leaving breadcrumbs behind about your brand. So you're slowly building it. As you get further along in your career, when you're old like me, then your reputation is actually out ahead of you. So before I get into a room, a lot of people in the room have some sort of preconceived notion about me, whether it's good or bad or whatever it is. And so if it's good, or if it's good, then it's great. You're working with in support of that personal brand. If it's not good, you're working against it. You're trying to get around it, to get consensus, to get your message heard, to do whatever it is that you need to do when you walk into that room. And so either way, whether you choose to take control over and manage your personal brand, you have one. It's just a matter of if you decide that you're going to take control over it and manage it, right? So that's why I think personal brand is important. In terms of what is personal brand, really, I would say, just to keep it in its simplest terms, it's really just your reputation. It's what you're known for. It's how other people perceive you. It's how they experience you. It's also, though, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Imagine if they're describing you to someone else. All of these things make up your brand. And a lot of people think that brand is outward, meaning what we show people. And I would argue it's not just that. I mean, unless you're like a well-established celebrity who has NDAs with all the people that are around you, or if you're the president and your brand really is only what you decide to show people. Unless you're that, it's not just what you show people, it's who you actually are. It's what people see and experience with you. And so personal brand works best if it's actually who you are, if you're not trying to keep up two different personas. And so I have a quote from Oprah Winfrey. She says, "When you do it right, your brand and your personality are one and the same." And I think that's true. So, and this will be helpful to you as you try to think about how to manage through your brand. So that's my take on what a brand is and why you need it. And then, like I said, I promised I wanted to leave you with some actionable things that you really, I think, are important when you're thinking about your personal brand, how you go about developing it, how you really manage it. Um, I even use the word, when you get to a certain place, you kind of need to ruthlessly manage your brand. And it doesn't mean in a bad way. It just means intently, you don't become obsessed with it, but you have to manage it. And so I'm going to give you 6 things today. So I'm going to start. The first one, which I think is the most important thing in your brand, is consistency. Consistency in your personality, consistency in your behaviors, consistency. People need to have a consistent experience of you when they interact with you. And so that means, like, does that mean you're never going to have good days and bad days? Like, yeah, we're human. We all have good days and bad days. But if one day someone interacts with me in a meeting, if I'm at a job site and I'm running a meeting or meeting with some clients or people, and I come and I'm super happy, joyful, and the next day I come and I'm super bitter, or it's like it's an inconsistent experience. And so they don't need to see all of that. Not because I'm hiding it. I may need an outlet somewhere else, not at work, so that when I show up, I can be consistently me. So people usually know what to expect when they're dealing with me. You could ask people all over. I heard when I was being courted for this particular role here that they went around and asked people, "What is it like to work with Linda?" And I don't know how many people they asked, but a lot. But they pretty much all said the same 4 things. She's tough but fair. She likes to have fun. She likes people, high expectations. Pretty much the same 4 things that they experience with me. So if you can just be mindful of that when you're dealing with people and interacting with them, that they get a consistent experience of you, I think that goes so far in your brand. The second thing is to get to know you. Now, this is harder than it sounds, but in order to decide, you'll hear as we go through these steps, you need to decide who you are, what your brand is going to be. You need to know what you care about, what your values are, what your personality traits are. And so it's about having a very high self-awareness. This can all be learned. It's not too difficult to figure out. Some of the things that you could do to figure out you and what you're passionate about, what your highest passion is when you get a project at work or an assignment, pay attention to which parts of the projects or which projects you actually get excited about doing. And that's going to give you a clue. It's about what you're actually passionate about. You need to sort of really find out what you stand for. So there's some things you could do. Go online and you could search for a personal brand framework. And a personal brand framework is something that kind of, it's like a pyramid. It asks you questions about your traits and your personalities and what you value, and it helps you to distill it down to at the top of that pyramid is your value proposition. It's what you mostly value. And this goes a long way in developing your brand, because as I go into the third item that's really important in your personal brand is to have a focus, a purpose. We call this a main theme. So what is it that the one main thing that you're known for? You don't have to only care about one thing, but you need to have a main theme. Like I'll use Beyonce as an example because she has a huge brand. Everybody knows her thing is girl power, right? That's all, like it's in her songs, it's what she talks about. She cares about a lot of other things and she contributes in a lot of other ways, but that's her main theme. Um, and if you have a main theme, you can coalesce a lot of things around a strong theme. Um, this is something that you'll find over time. It's not immediately as you go through experiences in your career and in life, it'll start to shape out. It takes over time, but if you start thinking about what your main theme is in your brand, I think that will be important. Mine, for me, my main theme took me years to figure out, get down to what it was. And I figured out that my highest passion is around people. I have a deep and profound passion for helping people. And I could do that in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, we build tall buildings and skyscrapers in the city. And look, we have to turn a profit because I'm running a business and, we have to take care of clients and we have to do a lot of really important things. But all of that can be coalesced around helping people. I'm helping my clients. I'm helping people to develop their careers, whatever it is that I'm doing. And so figuring out what your main theme is, I think it's going to be important for you when you're thinking about your personal brand. Okay. So then the fourth thing in this sort of how you do it, um, as you're thinking about what you want your personal brand to be, it's most effective if it's about others, believe it or not about yourself. If you're making a positive impact for people, for someone else. Um, so thinking about how you can leverage whatever it is that you have, what education you have, what privilege you are. All of us on this call have some sort of privilege in our lives to be where we are in this great industry. How you can leverage that for the good of someone else to make an impact and leave a legacy. Those are the best brands, how you be useful to someone. So I would implore you to think about that as you're trying to develop your personal brand. Um, there's a saying that says after you've developed your personal brand over time, there's two ways that you can continue to build your brand. One is to hop over others and burn bridges, or two is to steadily grow a community around your brand. And so if you're thinking about your brand from the perspective of how you can build a community around it, how it's impacting other people, I think it will go a long way. And so the most important thing I think you could do here is just keep a very positive attitude, try to help others, and manage with integrity. I say integrity is so critical to a brand. I mean, I guess you could have a brand that doesn't involve integrity. Certainly, you could. But I think integrity to me just means you're trying your best to do the right thing, even when no one is looking. Because believe me, if you do this right and your brand gets big, someone's always watching. So try to operate with high integrity, as best you can. Doesn't mean we won't make mistakes. You won't fail or fall down. That's okay too. We're still human. You get up and you try to fix it and repair it as best you can. But at least people know when they're dealing with you that you're trying your best to do the right thing. So positive impact is the fourth one that I would leave you with. Okay. The fifth one I'm going to say is remember that you are your brand. Your brand is you. It's one and the same. It's not about what company you're working at right now. It's not about what project you're working on. It's you that is your brand. And so, how do you think about growing your brand and your presence? I would say one of the best things you could do is get out there, be present in the industry, try to grow your network. Networking is uncomfortable for some of us, especially technical people like us. If you're in my firm, I come from a project management architecture background, so sometimes I've been around a lot of creative types. They're not necessarily introverts, but in this firm, I have a lot of cost managers. They're very numbers oriented, almost like accountant types. And so it's hard for them to feel comfortable networking. So I say, just be present, set a goal, go to an event, and just decide that you're going to talk to one person the first time, just one person. And the next time you go, you can set a goal like, I'm going to talk to two people that I don't know. And eventually you'll start to build some comfort with this. Some of the events are virtual now, which makes it a little easier, but at least showing up and being present in the industry, growing your network will be really important for you promoting your brand. Another thing that you could do is to serve on boards and volunteer on committees, which you're already doing by being a mentor with ACE. The number of people that you interface and interact with is great, but what you're really trying to do, I mean, it's really great. You want to support the organization, but what you're also doing at the same time is allowing other people to experience you, what it's like to work with you, what it's like to have to figure out problems with you. They get to see how smart you are. They get to understand your personality. This all goes towards building your brand. So when you're not in the room and your name comes up, they'll have something to say about you because they'll have experiences with you. So serving on boards, volunteering on committees in the industry is a really important thing that you could do to help build your brand, you as your brand. And then the third thing I'm going to suggest here is seems like a really simple thing. Like and comment on LinkedIn. Now, be thoughtful about what you like and comment on LinkedIn. If it's too politically charged or if it's revealing something that could be too polarizing, you might not want to do that on LinkedIn. Maybe that's something that's for Facebook or somewhere else. But when you like and comment things, you show up in people's feed. They remember you, they see you. This is actually growing your brand too. Being present on those platforms and getting people to kind of remember you. A few times I've had people that have reached in and said, oh, I saw your name popped up on something on LinkedIn that you liked and it made me think of you. And I wanted to call and talk to you about giving you all this project, you know? So believe it or not, being present on these platforms, that's the third thing I would say that you could start to do. And that helps build your brand too. From there, if you've built up your network, it's really important. Sometimes people either forget or don't know how to do this. You have to nurture the network. It's like a plant. You have to water it. You have to feed it. It's like you have to nurture this network. So I'm going to give you some real examples of how you could nurture your network. So for me, like if I meet someone who's new, of course, you might exchange contact information or reach out by email, but then sometimes it just kind of stops there. You don't really know exactly what else to say to them. But what you can do is, what I do is, I really listen. When I'm standing at a cocktail party talking to someone, I really listen and I try to hear, like, oh, I remember that this person has a kid who's starting junior high next year. Like, oh, I saw this thing about kids going back to school in person in New York, and there's junior high students, and I'm going to flip this article to them. It's a good way for me to stay in touch with them. Oh, I remember this guy was talking and he said he liked sailing, and I saw this article about sailboats, and I don't know, it looked interesting, and so I'm going to flip this article to him. And like people love that because they feel like you are actually they're engaging with you. So those are some ways that you could nurture your network. There's other ways too. If you can't think of anything or find anything in common, you could just reach out every now and again and see how the person is doing. But again, thinking about being useful to others, that's a really important thing. It goes a long way in nurturing the network. And finally, on this topic, I want to say, be so good and impactful that other people will tell your story for you. Um, it's it seems like a small thing, but it's not. The more that you do, the more, for me, I find the more I give, the more I do, the more I help. It's so impactful to people in their lives that other people start telling your story. Now other people are like your surrogates. They're building your brand for you because you've done something for them or contributed to their lives in an important way. So those are the things I would say about remembering that you are your brand. And then the sixth and final thing that I will say, and then I'll stop talking so that I can hear from you. This is almost as important as consistency, is authenticity. So remember what I said that Oprah Winfrey said, when you do this right, your brand and your personality are pretty much the same thing. And so I recognize that this could be easier said than done because being authentic, it also requires this thing called vulnerability that some of us don't like to show too much. And I would suggest, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. Brene Brown years ago did a TED Talk about vulnerability. She's written books about it. She has several books about it. I found as a leader that it's helped me a lot because sort of being who I am in a male-dominated industry, and then becoming a leader kind of early age-wise in my career. You just always want to, and I was in a brokerage house in CBRE, like you always need to show strength. You got to be strong. You always need to be strong. But I found as my career, as I ascended to other levels, that it was really important to show vulnerability. And if I had to do it all over again, I wish I would have learned it earlier. But it's part of being authentic in your personal brand is to be able to have the confidence to show vulnerability. Now, there are limits to this. I still don't do the crying at work thing. So, I mean, you have to manage it and balance it, and you have to know your audience, right? There might be times where you could do crying at work, but you just can't do that everywhere. So I think it's important to have confidence, own who you are, know your audience in the moment, but show appropriate vulnerability that helps you to be authentic. I would say that people connect extremely deeply with authenticity, even when they can't articulate it or they don't know why they feel so connected to you. They connect very deeply with authenticity. So, whatever is authentically you, trying not to manage a Facebook me and a LinkedIn me and a this me and a that me. There is some separation in your lives that needs to happen. And I'm not suggesting it's all blended together, but as close as you can be to who your real personality is with your brand, I think will just make it much more manageable for you. So those are the 6 tips that I have for you around personal brand. And I'm going to stop here or pause here and see if there's questions or other things that we'd like to cover today. And I have some questions for you all too, if you'd like.
I have a question.
Sure. Hi, Tricia.
So my general career has been not very linear. I was an acoustical engineer for like 7 years, and then I switched and became a facade engineer for 3 years, and now I'm at home working part-time with ACE. How do you build a personal brand that's not tied to your technical position?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Sometimes I used to say to people that you should think about your career, not as a ladder, but as a lattice. Sometimes you go sideways or diagonal, or I mean, I've even taken a lateral move one time because I saw a way up in a different area or field. And so I think that's okay. I think the main thing is figuring out what you stand for. So, I'll give you a real example. I think that my brand started to take on this life of its own. And it bothered me a little because I didn't want to be known for that. So when I was at Wells Fargo, I ran this huge, very successful supplier diversity program that I launched. And when we were building this massive tower and spending $1 billion, we ended up spending something like 51% of all the money with small and diverse businesses. And so somehow I became known as a champion for disadvantaged people. That's not what I am. I didn't want to be known for that. I guess I had to pause and decide, okay, my brand is going in a direction I want to be known as a leader. Like I'm a leader of people, and I will advocate for any one of my people that needs advocating for at the moment. Sometimes disadvantaged people need a little bit more advocating or a different kind of advocating, but I want to be known as a leader, not a champion for any one particular group, not for women, not for people of color, none of that. But that's what I was becoming known at. So I had to really stop and pause and decide, is it that bad of a thing to be known for that? Like, do I want to fight against it, or what am I going to do? No, I just have to let people experience me as a leader and decide for themselves. And so I think when and it is something that is great and I want to do, but as part of, it's not what I necessarily want to be known for. So, but I guess to get to the point of that is I figured out that what I am known for and want to be known for is people. Um, and that was my highest passion and my main theme. And that could translate across any job, any industry, any company. So I think, Tricia, if you figure out where your passions lie, what you care most about, what your main theme is, it should translate across whatever it is that you're doing in your current role. And in order to do that, you have to do self-study, self-evaluation, really dig deep, sit down and spend time, and it takes a little time to get there, but it'll translate across whatever you're doing. Great question. So
Actually, can I ask a question?
of course, Alberto.
How long has it taken you to develop this self-evaluation, or is this something that you not necessarily continuously do, but like if you do it continuously, does it change drastically?
Yeah, that's a good question. It took me years. I think that if I would have been more intentional about it earlier in my career, I could have done it faster. But for me, it happened. I didn't sit down. I did some things, like I read Strengths Finders and I figured out my strengths, and I did some other things, but I wasn't intentional enough about it early on for it to happen faster. So it's taken years for me to get to figuring out what my main theme is and kind of build this brand. Do I constantly continue to evaluate it? Absolutely, 100%. Did it shift drastically? Yeah. For me, I'm 20 years into my career. And when I got to 10 years into my career, I had to totally pivot how I thought about things. It doesn't mean I quit and started in a whole new industry. I had to pivot what I cared about. Um, and I realized now I'm 20 years and I think I'm halfway through my career, and I think it's time for me to pivot again. And so I'm doing a lot of self introspection to figure out. I'll give you an example in case you're interested of why I pivoted or how. But what I realized when I got 10 years into my career is I had spent that 10 years in a really good way trying to become as technically proficient as I possibly could. I wanted to be a really great and strong designer and know construction and understand project management and be able to contribute in an important way. So I spent my energy learning my technical skills and honing those, becoming really, really good at what I did. But what I realized as I was ascending into management after 10 years is that what got you here won't get you there, is a quote that I say to people sometimes. And I needed to pivot, and my focus needed to be on people. If I can understand people, how to influence people, how to persuade people, how to lead people and motivate people, I could do anything, technical or not. And I needed to shift my focus. So the types of books I started reading changed. The way I focused on things, my main theme changed. And I was no longer, my goals were not about, I want to be a VP or I want to make this much money. My goals were about my team and my people. So for me, that was a big change and shift. And like I said, I'm at another critical turning point. I think when you get halfway through your career and you're ascending to different levels, and I might pivot again, it might be time for me to focus on something else. I think that it is, in fact. And so I'm doing the work around that now. Right now, gosh, I've been studying people for 10 years. I know people really well. And now it's time for me to shift my focus and get really, really proficient with how to run a big business, like a big P&L. And so that's where my focus, I'm going back for my MBA. And so sometimes, yeah, I study it all the time and it does shift, but not constantly, because I need to make sure that people have a consistent experience of me. But there are points in your life where you need to really rethink it and reevaluate what your main theme is. I don't know if that answers the question though. Yeah, okay.
I think that
It's
answers
really
it
great
enough.
advice, though. um, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jesse.
That's
Just
all right, Sarah. Go
for me, I feel like hearing that is really nice. I'm not near midlife crisis, but I sometimes feel like in my career, I wonder if I need to pivot in any way. And I guess I just always felt like it wasn't really an option. So it's really nice to hear you talk about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you need to do that. Just take a whole different tact and focus.
Linda, we have a question for you.
You know, are those that you laid out a typical progression of technical proficiency, management, business acumen? Is that kind of like it feels like that's kind of a standard progression. I'm wondering if that's something you've come across in your reading and kind of know where you should pivot.
If you want it to be. So I've managed and hired a lot of people in my career. And I occasionally, not even occasionally, a lot, I come across some people. I mean, I remember I tried to promote a guy one time. He's like, no, I like being in the field. This is what I enjoy. This is what I want to do. And that is 100% okay. So if you figured out that, I really don't like being responsible for all these people and I don't want to be in a management track, like that's okay too. Like maybe you pivot in a different way. But if that's what you want, that's typical for someone who is trying to ascend through a leadership track. That was when I figured out what my highest passion was, that's where it led me. And, I always still have to think about my why. And so my why after 10 years was no longer, like I mentioned, about my title or my salary. It was more about what seat can I sit in that allows me to have the highest impact on people. It was very hard for me to leave Wells Fargo. I loved it there and they loved me and it was amazing. But when Turner and Townsend called, a part of this role is that I sit on the board of directors of the firm. And so even though it's 7,000 people and not 300,000 people, from this seat, I can impact those 7,000 people in a way that I never could have. And so I was thinking about my why, and it led me to make a very hard decision to leave Wells Fargo. I've been happy. It's been great. So I'm not suggesting it wasn't, but thinking about my why. So that's how my progression was, thinking about that. That's when I knew, that's what led me to know that it was time for me to pivot. How do you know, I guess, Jesse, is part of it. Yeah, that's pretty fundamental. If you want to go into management, you need to shift your thinking from being great at delivering at technical skills to figuring out how to get along with people, because that's really all it is in management. Yeah, that's the main core shift. And then when you get to, like I said, the place that I am now, I have to shift my focus from people, only because you get to a certain place where you interact. I mean, I probably have 400 people here in my East USA business, and I don't get to interact with most of them most of the time. Mostly I'm running the business. And so that's why I feel like I'm in a place when I need to shift, and I have a very strong team of leaders and VPs that are mostly interacting with the people. So that's how I know right now that it's time for me to pivot again, after another 10 years.
Linda, it looks like we have a question from Dejana in the chat. She's asking, you said you've read some Strength Finders. Is there a book or an article that you could recommend to us?
Sure. Oh my goodness, I love to read. I read all the time. But so Strength Finders is a really quick read, even for people who aren't into reading, because the way the book is structured, you read about 30 pages, which explains what it is. You take a test online, and then you only read your 5 strengths. And this is so crucial because it goes to knowing yourself. Absolutely. It was probably the best thing I could have done to get to know myself, figure out where my strengths were and where I lie. And every time you take the test, the top 5 could shift out a little bit, but usually if there's a really dominant trait, which I have one, it always shows up as number 1. For me, it's strategic thinking. That's how my brain works. But guess how it would be for me if I didn't know that. I might be stuck doing a lot of tactical work. I might be managing my team or surrounding myself with people who think about things exactly the way I do, which is not what I want to do. I need to put complementary pieces around myself. They're good where I'm weak, and I'm good where they're weak. And so I think Strength Finders will go a long way to help you with knowing yourself. Because I'm business focused, I really love the book Good to Great. Was a really good one. And as we're going through here, I'll try to look through my library and see if there's other ones that I really, really love. But there's this one book that is kind of long, but you could read pieces from it. It's called The Power of Positive Thinking. Gosh, it was so transformative to me. It doesn't mean you're happy-go-lucky all the time. It's not that. It's just when adversity happens, like all of us face challenging situations, the most important thing is not what happened to you, but it's how you respond to it, how you think about it. And so it just helped me because as a leader, I not only have to get myself through difficult situations, I have to lead a team through difficult situations. And I imagine you all do as well. And so The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale, is an old book, but a really, really good one.
I just wrote all of those down. Thank you.
Oh, sure. So I'll jump in with a question if you want, unless anyone wants to go. So as you're trying to build your brand, what do you do about the haters? What if you found that there was someone who you felt was intentionally trying to bring down your brand in the industry? How do you think you should handle that amidst managing your brand?
That's
I think
definitely
my
a tough
personal
one.
example is probably not the right answer, but I think I almost just ignore them at this point and just kind of move on, which I'm sure is not the right solution. But I think, you know, if I've had a client say that I did a job for, and at some point we butted heads and I wasn't able to help them as much as I wanted to, and it didn't work out, I kind of just like ignore them. And, you know, we finished the project, we go our separate ways. I'm sure that's the wrong answer. So I hope you can teach me a better way, or somebody else here can offer a better solution.
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Jenny, sorry.
I was just thinking, hi, sorry, I joined a little late.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi, the way, so Jesse, that's a really interesting, so like your immediate reaction was to a client. I find more pushback internally about like who I am and how I handle my business versus how like internally how other people handle business, more so than how clients receive me. So I'm curious to know, and this is kind of a question that I was kind of thinking about, apologies if you've already discussed this, but like, does your, Linda, does your strategy kind of change internally versus externally in terms of showing people who you are and what you represent and your moral compass? And like, you know, from an internal standpoint, like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
It's so hard, especially as you're trying to grow and it may be different than the vision that your company has.
Yeah.
That was what I was gonna say too. Like my first thought was not client facing, it was definitely internal. And I know how I've handled my situations like that. But yeah, it is kind of, I don't know, what do you do when one person thinks that you should be doing something and they see you in one light and it's absolutely not what you had planned for yourself?
Yeah, great questions. So one of your questions, Jenny, was does it change internally to externally? I'm going to say nope. It's a consistent experience that people get of me. And so I make sure it's the same with whomever I'm dealing with, because the way I think about it is the same people that are internal today could get hired by a client, they could move to another firm. Tomorrow, they might be external. So it's consistent, whoever it is that I'm dealing with. And what do you do if one person thinks you should be doing something in a different way? Kind of how do you handle it? So I'm going to say, Jesse, that ignoring them, it might not be the wrong answer. I think the most important thing in this situation is assess the size of the threat. So who is this person? What kind of influence do they really have? If nobody knows them and they're not influential over anybody, probably ignore might be the right thing to do. Not worth my energy to go try to strain it out with them. But if this person has an outsized influence on the person controlling the size of my bonus or my paycheck, or if they have an outside influence in the industry, it's important for me not to ignore it and for me to go address it with them. And so the first thing I do is take a beat. If I hear this, like, I don't just go after it right away. You have to get like settled a little bit, meditate, do whatever you do, sleep on it, take a day. But eventually I do have to go and talk to them. The first thing I do is I just address it with them, because maybe there was something in their experience with me that didn't sit well with them. Maybe I legitimately rubbed them the wrong way. I'm going to try to be open to that feedback. Maybe they're just a hater and I just decide like, there's nothing I could do about this relationship. But if it's an outsized threat, you have to figure it out. You don't want to leave a big influencer out there saying negative things about you. So maybe just go talk to them. When you do, it's important not to be combative. You have to like take a beat, like I said, and be calm and open to the feedback. And then guess what? When you get the feedback, it's up to you. You can decide if you're going to throw that feedback out the window or if you're going to take it in and see if it's real and if there's anything you should do to change. And so I think ignoring it is not always the wrong answer, but the most important thing to do is really assess the size of the threat. Now, there's been times, I will say, I have had this experience when I assessed the size of the threat and I was wrong about it. I thought the threat was minimal and it was bigger than I thought. And that's really come back to hurt me in the one instance where it happened. But it was a hard lesson learned for me. Like, I was told I thought this person had no influence. And in fact, she did. And so I hadn't properly taken care of the situation. So if I had to do it over again, I would go try to address it with her. That's kind of the first thing that I would do. And then maybe you address it with the person and it doesn't fix it. So then what do you do? The only other thing you can do is to be more present, show up more, have more surrogates, let other people experience you. And so then you have other advocates that are around this person that are saying, and if somebody's saying something negative, you have other people that have benefited from the impact that I've made for them or that I've helped in some kind of way, and they'll become my surrogate. So when someone is really after me and they're a big outsized threat, I've tried to talk to them. I can't get them on side with me. The next best thing for me to do, show up more, be more present, be present for other people, impact more people, and let my surrogates do the work. And I'd say that's how I handle, like, if someone is just a hater. I've literally had someone say, like, nope, Linda wouldn't do that. It's not within her character. Well, they only know my character because they've had experience working together with me. I hope that's helpful. Trisha's asking, what do you do when you try to fix it and they don't care because they just don't like you? So that's, I mean, it happens sometimes, or they could be, maybe they're envious is how I look at it. So I try my best to turn on my positive thinking. I don't ignore or put on rose-colored glasses, but I try to assume the best possible intentions in people. And even if they don't have good intentions, if I assume the best possible intentions, that's for me. That helps me to be able to manage with them and deal with them and not be angry all the time at them. And so that's when you, like I said, you go to work being present, impacting other people, do what you do, let other people experience you. And then there will be so many people that are saying positive things that it will drown out the voice of that negative person, you know, because you're not going to can't make everybody happy all the time. I hope that's helpful.
One thing I've been thinking about as we've been talking this is, you know, all of our companies, I'm sure, have a very dedicated branding, right? All of our companies have brought in consultants and spent all this money and effort to brand ourselves properly, and tons of interviews with the board to make sure it properly, you know, handles our strengths and stuff. And while this is something that I've crossed in my own personal development, it's not something that I've given high priority to. I kind of, you know, I certainly have some answers to a lot of, you know, where I stand on things, but not necessarily something I track. And I'm just kind of trying to, I don't have a direct question or even comment here, but I'm trying to pull that parallel of, you know, how important this is to our companies, how much they've all chosen to focus on it over the years versus how it's kind of left up to us for our own personal, and how much benefit there is to having your own personal brand aligned with the company brand so that they reinforce each other and grow together and, you know, spin off each other.
Yeah,
Just
it's a
general
good
thoughts.
thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. It's actually something that you probably would deal with like later on in your career. And the reason I say that is, like, for example, I'll be super honest here. When this company, Turner Townsend, was trying to recruit me, it's sort of an unknown brand. I mean, I knew who they were, but I honestly, before I hired them to work on that project for me, I never heard of Turner Townsend. So, um, uh, but when they approached me, they were very honest. They said, well, in New York, your brand, Linda Foggie, is bigger than Turner Townsend's brand. And so we want to commingle this. And so um, for me, at this point in my career, I had to decide if what was known about their brand could align, if their values aligned with mine. And if it didn't, I couldn't have come here because I've worked too hard to be known for high integrity and for strong character and for helping people. And if their brand was something else, it just couldn't have married. And so in some ways, it's important that you're able to align it, you know, later in your career. But I think your personal brand early in your career is just that. It's you and what you're known for. And it should transcend whatever company you're with or project that you're working on at the moment. And that's not a bad thing. You try as hard as you can to be with a firm that aligns with your values to the extent that you can. But sometimes you also just need to take a role because you're going to get a certain kind of experience, and you might already have an exit strategy when you enter the role, and that's okay too. But I don't think it's necessarily 100% crucial that you're constantly early in your career aligning your brand to your company's brand, because you're who you are, and you'll change. You might change companies or firms at some point, and you want to be known in the industry for what you're known for too. Would be my thoughts on that.
So Linda, you said you had a really hard time leaving Wells Fargo. You
Yeah.
really enjoyed your experience there. So how are you able to separate yourself from your identity at Wells Fargo to kind of have like the, I don't want to say the confidence, because clearly you achieved your goals and now you're at a different firm, right? But how did you get like kind of like the strength to do that and separate who you were from Wells Fargo and move on?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jenny. It was so hard because you do become synonymous with, I was like Linda Foggie, Wells Fargo, like it was all one word, you
Right.
know. So like to also I felt like I was leaving home. I had mentors and sponsors at Wells Fargo and they were good to me. And so yeah, it was super hard for me to pull myself away from that. But how I did it is I'm gonna say two things. I had to keep going back to my why. What is my purpose? My highest purpose is not to build 30 Hudson Yards or to run a portfolio or to design great spaces. My highest purpose is people. And so when I was torn, like I didn't sleep for 10 nights about the decision, literally. Um, but when I was, and I was getting pulled back and forth. I had gotten really close with the CEO of Wells Fargo. And then there was the CEO of Turner and Townsend, and they're both quite persuasive and they're both in my ear. And when I would get torn in those moments, I had to keep going back to my main theme and my brand, my why, my highest purpose. And at the end of the day, the Turner and Townsend option won out because I thought from this seat, I could impact more people. That was it. That was pretty much what it was. I had to think about other things too, like in my long-term career strategy, what I want to be doing 10 years from now. I need to have experience running a big business. I need to run a P&L, and this provided me those opportunities, and that could never happen at Wells Fargo being inside of a real estate department. So I thought about all those things too, but what drove me was that. And the second thing is, I have this little saying that I tell a little story about when I got to architecture school 20 years ago. The school was it wasn't a friendly place for me to be, and a lot of the kids there came from families where their fathers were architects, and they knew a lot more than I knew. Like I had no parents in corporate America, and it was almost like I was being weeded out, like the weed out process in the first year. And some of the things one of the professors would say, like, you better have a backup major because a lot of people drop out of architecture. And so I say this saying to say, in that moment I could have chose to believe them or believe in me. And I chose to believe in me. And so every time, at every career move, at every turn, I bet on me. I don't bet on Turner and Townsend. I didn't bet on Wells Fargo. I bet on me, which meant that I could get into a role. I know I'm smart. I could figure it out. I didn't know all the parts of this role when I took it. About 85% of it I knew how to do in my sleep. But there was about 15% of this role I had never done before. So I just decided to believe in myself and take the leap. So those are the two things I would say to you is remember your why, your highest purpose. When you figure that out, it'll be a great thing unless you already know it. And then believe it. I just believe in myself. Just take a bet on me.
Thank you. That was probably the most genuine and honest answer I've heard from regarding this whole thing in a very long time. So I really appreciate
good.
the transparency. And I wrote these down and I highlighted and underlined them. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That was really fantastic advice.
Thank you.
This is a really,
Oh, I have a question. Is that okay, Tania?
yeah.
So clearly this is happening right now. And I know that there are other people on this call who are starting families. How much of your family do you incorporate into your personal brand professionally?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. No one's ever asked me that before. So it's changed over the years. I remember I was working at CPRE years ago, and I worked really, really closely with these two guys. They were from Atlanta, so we traveled all the time together. And we had worked together for 3 entire years, like daily. And one day, the guy who was my boss was insisting on coming to Philadelphia to see me, and they were going to meet here, and he wanted me to come down. And I kept saying, I can't come, I can't come. And then finally, in a meeting, he sort of pressed me in front of others. And I finally said, like, I can't come because it's President's Day and school is closed and I don't have a babysitter. And the three of them said, you have kids? It's like, we had worked together for 3 years and they never knew. So early in my career, I never mentioned it. I never said anything about it. Not like I was hiding it. I felt like it was going to hold me back. That was years ago. I don't do that today. I'm super open about the fact that I'm a mom and I have 2 boys, and that is a part of my life. I'm horrible at finding a balance. I don't even try anymore to find a balance. I'm sort of probably would be called a slightly work obsessed. And so I stopped a while ago focusing on the quantity of time that I can spend with my family and focused on the quality. So super high quality impact. I figure out what the kids like to do and we do those things, and the rest I leave to husband, and they're all good with that. And that's just kind of how it is. And whenever someone asks for my bio, the last little line of it says something about that my biggest achievement is the fact that I'm a mother to these 2 boys and that I'm a wife to my husband, Tim. And I do feel that way. And so I think it's great now how it is. We can be open about it. I super incorporate it into my brand. I'm very proud of it because I feel like, my experience being a mother, it affects the way in which I lead, I should say. And it doesn't mean you can't lead if you're not a mother or a father. It just means that this contributes to the way in which I make decisions, and so because I'm trying to be, because I want to be authentic and people's experience to be real with me, I just let it bleed right into my personal brand. I don't hide it at all. That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. That was such a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot, and I definitely also wrote down all the names of the books that you've shared with us. I just want to be respectful of time. We have 3 minutes until 1 p.m. So if you have any closing comments or anything else that you want to leave our participants with, or if the participants have anything that they'd like to say to Linda, we can do that now.
I'm just sad this conversation can't keep going because it's been really, really wonderful. Like, I learned a lot, and I feel like it was all stuff I really needed to hear, like especially today, I think. So like, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. I'm glad it was useful.
Yeah, most definitely. Really appreciate it a lot. I think we all need to hear some of this.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad I could be here with you. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I had a chance to watch one of the recordings from one of the sessions before, and I was really impressed with you all, this group of people here. So I was really looking forward to today, and it has not disappointed. So thank you for being so engaged and asking great questions. And I'm so glad that you felt that it was a good use of your time. And I'll be happy to follow up with the list of books. I saw someone ask that, and I'll add a few more to it that I think are super high impact and not too long. And I'll send those over to Tania as well. So thank you so much for the time and for having me today.
Thank you.
Linda.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Bye,
Linda.
everyone.
Thank
We
you.
recorded this session, so I'll share it out with you later, as well as the titles of the books. So we'll see you next week, everyone, for
Thank you.
session 7.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.